Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun for our Only Murders in the Building Season 4, Episode 4 preview. Next week, we're getting into The Stuntman. That is the title for this particular installment.
Isn't it crazy that we're already going into episode 4? Like, it feels like the show just started. It is blowing by. And maybe it's because we've had no real great TV since last year. I mean, there's been little gems here or there, but there hasn't been a lot of TV because of the strikes that happened. There was nothing getting made, and then it took a long time to get things to get made. And now
Yeah.
everything is finally coming back, but I can't believe how quickly this is going by.
I'm just very grateful that they've already announced the season 5 renewal, so we
Yeah.
can just be like, all right, we don't have to worry about this being the end of the line, but I am still worried about how fast it's going. So the Stuntman, like, first and foremost, this continues the trend that we have discussed. Every title so far has been a movie.
Mhm.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have been familiar with all of these films. I mean, you guys can let us know in the comments if you see any sort of thematic connections here. Here, it
Yeah.
just feels kind of straightforward. This is a story about Stuntman, and the title is The Stuntman.
And if you guys have seen any of the movies that have been the titles of these episodes so far, I have seen zero.
Squadoosh.
Yeah.
That is where I am with it as well.
But before we get too much further into it, make sure you hit that
Mhm.
subscribe button. We are bringing you Only Murders videos 3 times a week. We have reviews and previews every single Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we
Mhm.
have theory videos. And we have a really good one coming up for you tomorrow, all about the ham radio. We are also covering Slow Horses, and
Yeah.
The Old Man is going to be coming up this week over on FX. Two more sort of fun thrillers. If you're looking for something else to jump into, these two shows are really great.
Yeah, they are totally worth your time. And also, if you guys do want to support us further, be sure to join our Patreon. We have a link in the description below there.
Mhm.
And for just $5 a month, you can really help us to be able to continue to make these videos for you guys. We can also vote in various polls about what we're covering. And exclusively on Patreon coming up, we have The Penguin starring Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
It is like a spin-off after effects of The Batman. So I'm
Mhm.
really excited for us to be able to dive into that. And thank you so much to everyone who is supporting us over there.
Okay, so let's talk about the synopsis
Okay.
of what's going to be coming up for this episode. So, Charles, Oliver, and Mabel delve into the particular universe of stunt people. That's part of it.
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder if we're going to see some cameos from some famous stunt people like Zoe Bell, or I mean Jackie Chan would be amazing. I'm sure we're not going to, but there's also Colin Fallenweeder. I think I'm saying his name wrong, but he's like a really popular stuntman right now. It would be really cool to see some actual stunt people on the show that are like iconic.
I think it would be pretty important too in terms of like informing who Sazz is, because Sazz is sort of shown as a character. She is pretty selfless. Like, she wants to be there for Charles, and Charles's approval, I think, matters to her, but she's never cared that much about being, a big star, her name in lights. Stuntmen and stunt people in general have been a very unappreciated community.
Absolutely. That's why it would be really cool to see this. I remember like a movie that I really like is Death Proof. And
Mhm.
one of the reasons that I really like it is they actually took some of the stunt people that are typically behind the scenes, like Zoe Bell, who was in Kill Bill
Mhm.
as the stunt person. So again, you don't really get to see her, but you do, you know what I mean? But in Death Proof, they actually put her as a character in the film doing stunt work. Like, it was really amazing to see. So I am hoping that they're going to do something like that here.
I think it could be really, really fun and a great nod to that community. And I think the larger story question that I have with this right now is pretty simply, what makes it that Charles, Mabel, and Oliver want to do this now? Because we're coming off of episode 3, and the big cliffhanger at the end of episode 3 is this person on the other side of the ham radio. There's
Mhm.
nothing in episode 3 that suggests, okay, you guys need to go and look into the world of stunt people now. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, it makes sense if Sazz is the target, that you go into her past and try to
Mhm.
figure out, okay, who would want to have it out for her. Like, I get it, but it's just also, are there more pressing concerns at this point?
Okay, the second part of the synopsis is they encounter a suspect with an incredibly ... familiar ... face ... So I'm like, okay, they've very clearly wanted to
Yeah.
be somebody that we've seen before. Like maybe they want to bring in somebody that we've seen before, like a Tina Fey or
Yeah.
Matthew Broderick or something like that. But I was kind of wondering if it could be maybe Sazz's dad or somebody in Sazz's family,
Hmm.
because it seems very much like she said, I learned a lot from my dad, who was, stuntman, and other people in my family and that sort of thing. So could it be somebody who's a familiar face because it's a relative of Sazz?
It could be a relative of Saz who may feel like on some level that, okay, Charles, you didn't respect Saz enough. You didn't do enough to make her feel appreciated. And, that could be a
Mm.
potential motive. But I mean, granted, if that is a motive, then they never would have intended to take out Saz. And they must have thought that Charles was the target at that point.
Mhm,
Or if it's
mhm.
just somebody else in the stunt community who is jealous, then you kind of get into, well, then anybody could have been the target at that point. I think depending on how they present this, there are a lot of different possibilities at play, but because of sort of stunt people's status as sort of being unappreciated in the
Mhm.
Hollywood community, it's kind of easy to see why a grudge would be building up over time, especially if, you're not getting jobs, you're not getting money, or Saz belittled them, or Charles belittled them, because I'm assuming Brazos is not the only person on Brazos that had to do stunts. I'm sure the majority of them went his way, but usually, these crime procedurals, they have like 4 or 5 people that are leads, and some of them probably have stunt people here and there.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like Saz had a pretty steady job as a stunt person, being with Charles and him being Brazos for so many years, that you're right. Like having steady stunt work is not the easiest thing to kind of come by, especially a sweet gig like that. Like
Mhm.
if you're like on NCIS for 200 years, you have a really good
Yeah,
paycheck that continues to come in. And if you're a stunt person on NCIS
yeah.
for 200 episodes, then you're also having a great paycheck coming in. Where a lot of other stunt people, it's kind of like, oh, it's coming as it is. It's a movie here or there, or a episode here or there.
I want to go into what you said a second ago about Tina Fey, because this is what I think the show is going to try to do here with this familiar face, is that they have a lot of people who they clearly really, really like to work with, and a lot of them are pretty famous. However,
Broderick,
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 Broderick.
see, I can't help but chant that just because I love Broderick, but like, I think they love to work with these people, but at the same time, you have to find ways to have a character that, suits your story. Like at this point, does it make sense for Cinda Canning to show up? Does it make sense for Matthew Broderick to show up with some other sort of ridiculous demands? I wouldn't necessarily see that,
Mhm.
but you could easily cast one of them in the role of a stunt person or something like this, because yes, it is stunt casting, pun very much intended, but
Yeah.
two, it's also just a tradition in TV in general. I mean, if you've watched any of the Law and Order shows, or if you watch NCIS that you mentioned, there are actors who appear on one of those shows, then they come back 10 years later playing a different character.
Yeah.
It's just like this stuff happens all the time. And I think this is probably just going to be a nod to that. And of course, it's another possible cameo that the show hasn't teased beforehand, so that
Yeah.
they kind of get like that little bit of surprise out of you.
Or maybe Meryl Streep. I mean, they really were pushing that she was going to be, part of the season. We've seen her for like a minute, but maybe they'll have her playing her own stunt person.
I would love that. Let Meryl cook. Like,
Yeah.
just let Meryl Streep play like 10 roles for all I care. I'm not really going to be upset about that. But so we have this element of surprise in the form of, okay, here is a quote unquote familiar face.
Yeah.
Now, how much progress are we actually going to make on who killed Sassy? I keep wanting to say who killed Charles because I keep trying to
He's
go.
next.
I think that's why.
You
It's
keep
'cause
snooping around, you're going to get got.
I think I'm kind of conditioning myself to think that, but I kind of feel like we might be gearing up for another red herring here because it is still kind of early on
Yeah.
in the season. I think the stunt person we end up meeting or having some sort of conversation with in this episode, they probably know something, as in, they probably know at the very least where the bodies are buried for Charles. And that's what we actually need to figure out at this point because Charles keeps having this sort of woe is me, Eeyore, head down. Who would ever want to kill, little old me when he is so oblivious to a lot of stuff? And he clearly, we've seen it on the show before, he does not really recognize how much his actions at the height of his fame may have harmed other people. And it's pretty easy to think that that's something that has happened before on an even greater scale. And he just doesn't remember it or just isn't aware of it.
Yeah, they've set up very much that he is unaware and doesn't seem to really retain information and things that are happening around him. He doesn't always seem to understand what's happening. It's
Mhm.
very possible that something happened around him or somebody slipped something around him that he doesn't necessarily remember, but maybe with the movie coming out, it's going to come to the surface. We saw it briefly mentioned that he had this poker game every Friday
Yeah.
night for 8 years, and there were people that were at that game that he cannot remember their names. And like, you're gonna have people at your place every single Friday
Yeah.
night for 8 years, and you can't remember their names. It feels like there's a lot of secrets that are probably in Charles that are just so deep in, or that he just legit didn't pay attention to, that now are also going to be a surprise to him when they come to the surface.
Here's what, for me, I absolutely need to see within this episode because I've said now that I think the killer is somebody or the person who hired the killer, whatever you might want to identify it. This is a tricky season because I think we're both of the belief that the killer actually hired somebody to
Yeah.
do the act. So I think the big bad is somebody who we might have seen just very briefly in the premiere, one of the people working on the movie. And if that is the case, I think this is an episode where we probably need to see them again on some level. I don't think it's going to be that satisfying if we don't see the big bad again until episode 9, and maybe we put together the motive beforehand that they've had some long-standing grudge against Charles for whatever reason. But I think it's more effective if we see them now, and it kind of bodes this question of, okay, they've already put out filming notices that the movie is starting up soon. Is production for the movie actually happening in this episode? Is that how some of these stunt people kind of all get together?
Yeah, it feels like that's gotta be the case. That, yes, there's a new murder that's going on now, but that's not what the movie is about.
Yeah.
The movie would be about either seasons 1, 2, and 3. And because that's the information that they would have, it's already ready to go. They're already in production. They're 3 weeks away. So it has to be something to do with season 1, 2, or 3 that they're going to be covering as a storyline in the building.
Is it going to be too much for this show if we're in a situation where in this episode we have real Mabel, fake Mabel, Mabel stunt person, and we're starting to get into like so many different variants of characters that we're having a little bit of a multiverse going on here?
It very well could be coming together that way. I think it's just, if the person behind this works on the movie,
Yeah.
we need to get the movie to the Arconia sooner rather than later. And I do think this episode will be bringing people to the Arconia. I think it can't just be like, oh, the actors are with you for a day and now they're gone again. It's like this movie has barely meant anything
Yeah.
to this season, and it's like this huge plot line.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And if the killer or big bad intentionally joined the movie to be closer to Charles so that they could take him out at the end of all this, we need to start building to that point. Like, this is a great opportunity to do that. It just feels like for the limited amount of time this show has, everything has to be at least somewhat connected. We can't have the movie be here and then the actual killer be somewhere way, way, way over there. There's just no way to pull that off.
No, I don't want it to be like as connected as it was last season. Season 3 was my least favorite season because it was more about the play and the murder was an afterthought. And it was, even for me, I still look back at it as an accident. I mean, Donna was, rat poison, and it was just enough to make him sick, not to kill him. So it wasn't on purpose. And
Yeah.
then you have this tussle with Cliff, and it's like, oopsie, down the elevator. Like, he didn't push him. They were in like a tussle and he fell. Like, it can't be like that, where we
No.
see not enough clues throughout the actual show to be able to put anything together by the end of it. So, like, we barely saw Cliff last season at all. So they need to bring that person in next episode.
Yeah, this needs to be a lot juicier. I think a lot more personal than what we saw last season. Like, this show is best. Yes, it's a comedy, but it's not like the Bear comedy that's just pretending to be a comedy. It is a comedy, but the drama
Yeah.
needs to escalate here or there. And we need to start actually seeing, real legitimate fear and something that
Yeah.
makes this different than what we had last time.
Who is Eugene Levy's stunt person? It's not Sazz,
Yeah.
because Sazz was doing stunt work for
Yeah.
Scott. But could it be
Oh.
Scott? And that's why Scott was at the movie premiere, or not the premiere, but like the movie
Yeah.
party, the pre-party. Like, why was he at that
No,
party?
my wheels are just, I'm sitting here with my mouth open because my wheels are just turning in my head.
I just don't understand why he was at that party. And I know I keep like harping on it, but it's so weird. He has no reason to be there. But if we're diving into the world of stunt people,
Yeah.
you mentioned the idea, are we going to see Mabel plus Eva plus her stunt woman? Well, could we be seeing that happen here as well for Eugene Levy?
I don't think it's a
And it's
possibility.
not.
Okay, if it is
It's
Scott,
not. It's
no.
not. I don't know. I'm just on my island.
You know what though?
I'm on Scott Bakula Island.
You are on Scott Bakula. I mean, the producers have already been like, "Oh no, he's only in one episode." But
Sure.
we know that you guys are
Dan.
capable of lying. So it's just like we're still on that. No, I think this is going to be a fun episode. I think it's going to be informative, learning a lot more about Sazz's past is in turn learning a lot more about Charles's past, and that's really the important stuff to get from point A to point B. But as Justice set up earlier, we have a lot more Only Murders in the Building stuff coming. The ham radio discussion tomorrow, I think especially, it's going to be really, really important as we get into where did Sazz get into this idea of using ham radios? How long has that gone on? Has it kind of linked to some of the stuff that we've talked about here, like the poker game? So be sure to hit that subscribe button. We don't want you guys to miss any of that. Also, you can support us further by joining our Patreon. That link is in the description below. For $5 a month, you can vote in polls. You help to support us. And coming up, we have the Penguin that will be covered exclusively there. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you here next time.